Okay, hey, John, third time's a charm.
It is?
We hope. You all don't realize this, but we were having some trouble with the video today, which we'll talk about more in depth in a moment. A lot of things happening this week. It's a different kind of week here as we move back into in person worship, but you have a class going on,
I
John.
do. So starting this Thursday, I've got a class on a book called The Bible Tells Me So. It's written by a professor at Eastern University named Peter Enns. And his goal as professor of Bible is to help readers, whether you're a pastor, whether you're a layperson, whether you're just any person of faith, to come to terms with some of the weird, off-putting, violent, and just downright culturally different parts of the Bible. So this is going to be a 7-week study. We've got 3 times that we're meeting. Thursday morning, 10 to 11:30. Thursday evening, 6 to 7:30, and then Monday afternoons from 1 to 2:30. I'm looking to get about 15 people in each session, so there's still room to hop on in if you want to, but this should just be a really kind of interesting class to really talk about the questions that we've always had about Scripture and hopefully find someone who's waded into those waters that can help us kind of reconcile that there's big differences between the Old Testament and the New Testament,
Right.
and
Well, I
one
think
book to another.
and how we read Scripture and how it's actually intended to be read, probably too.
Yeah.
So it's good, wonderful, wonderful. Well, this week worship shifts a little bit. We're going to be moving back to in-person worship. If you haven't checked your email, assuming you're on our email distribution list, an email just went out this morning that allows you to sign up for one of the 2 worship services. If they fill up, because I know that they've been filling up pretty steadily today. I don't want to say fast, but steadily today. And I imagine that will continue over the course of the next couple of days. If they get filled up, you get blocked out, give us a call, let us know. We'll see what we can do. We've put 60 spots there. We may have a few extra to be able to give out to people who call us to let us know that they got kind of shut out from it. So just let us know, keep us posted. And I think it also begs a little explanation as well as to how things are going to go. I am still hoping to put out a video before the end of this week that shows you what it's going to be like when you walk in, what you'll need to bring, how the flow of everything will take place. That will be really important for you to watch ahead of time. But I think the other thing is John and I really want to beg a lot of grace from you over the next few weeks, because as hard as it has been to shift to doing everything remotely, coming back into in-person worship is going to be difficult too.
Yeah.
And you saw some of that in worship, which we tried to notify everybody ahead of by putting it in nice bold-faced red type in the email so that people knew. But I think it frustrated a lot of people. The music didn't come through well. There's a shift in how this has to be done on Sunday mornings. For the last several weeks, John and I have been walking around with cell phones in our hands so that you can hear the service. That's not a long-term solution. So this week, a lot of the shifts that took place were involved in us, number one, working out the live stream. That's perfect.
Yeah, we figured that pretty well out.
Yeah, that's perfect now. Because if you were trying to watch Evan's funeral a couple weeks ago, it was choppy and problematic. That problem took us a couple of weeks to solve. Done. Got that. Now the second problem is we can't keep walking around with cell phones all the time. So we tried to run the sound through the soundboard this time. Wound up having trouble with one microphone, another one was shut off, and so that caused a lot of the sound problems. I need to encourage you to show us some grace. We know. We're trying to figure it out too. But after you do a 1-hour service or a 45-minute service or whatever it works out to be, and you get to the end and you find out the sound is messed up and everybody has split to the 4 winds, trying to get the staff back again to do it again, it was a little bit of a problem. In addition, this go around, we're going to have people in worship. I just can't do a whole nother worship service if the sound isn't perfect. We've got to kind of struggle along with one another, and I promise you, there will be more testing, just like there was last week. We'll get it right. We'll do it well. We always do. But it's going to take us a little bit to get volumes together and get them set to where they need to be so that it's even volumes on the speakers are doing things right, and so that the music is picked up well. I think you'll see about a 200% improvement this week over this past week. But please show us some grace. It's really hard to get all this done, and it's additionally hard because, John, your degrees in school were
nothing technology wise.
right, and mine was politics, business, law, and no technology degrees, and nobody's here to help us with this, and so we're trying to figure this out. So
I think the thing with all of us, I think we're trying to figure out how to worship again.
yeah,
Where you and I for sure, and I think our families too, have kind of gotten used to a way of worshiping that's certainly very, very different than what we are used to. And now we're having to kind of kick the dust off the boots that we used to wear, make sure the size is still right on those boots.
Right.
And it's going to take us a minute. It's
Right.
going to take us, I'm certainly not used to wearing my Madonna mic. I'm used to having a phone and speaking into the phone, and I think it's probably the same for
Right.
you. It's
Yep.
going to take a little bit, and
what's more, John, is that it's not just new from what we've been doing the last few weeks, because we're now live streaming, and we have to do that every week for the rest of our lives.
yeah, blending old and new is going to take
Yeah.
a little bit to figure out. But this is
that's
one
new
of
too.
those kind of, I don't want to necessarily say seismic shift, but it's a real culture change. That it's one thing if you and I had worked on it for a year and said this is where we want to go.
Right.
We've been a little bit behind the eight ball the whole time.
Yeah.
So we're now kind of on our mileage pace, I think, of where we want to be for
Right.
getting things moving. But
I think the other thing you'll have to be patient with this week is, because things are live streaming, I'm going to have to figure out whether or not there actually is a link that gets emailed out, or if it's just going to be on all of you to get to our YouTube page,
which we can send you a link
which
to.
we can send you a link to, and then you have to find the video on that page that might say live on it or something
Yeah.
like that. It's not going to be pre-recorded, and if you show up at 8:20 to see it, because we're live streaming at 8, the service will already be in progress.
So you'll be right about the sermon.
So you'll be right about the sermon at that point or partway through the sermon. So my point being that if you catch it right at 8 o'clock, you'll be right at the start of worship, because it's going to be streamed live. If you catch it at probably 9 or 9:15, you can pick it from the beginning. But if the service is still happening, you're going to catch it
There's
in the
no
middle.
way to rewind.
There's no way to rewind during that. So you're going to have to get used to that as well. That's a new thing that live streaming creates.
Yeah.
That live streaming creates. So it'll be, so basically the way live streaming works is during that hour of worship, it's live. It's just like flicking on the news. It's happening in real time. Or a speech or something. It's in real time. But an hour or so later, you can watch it whenever you want, as many times as you want. And you can pick it up halfway through, fast forward, rewind, and do all of that. But that will be a change for you as well. And that's just something you'll have to get used to also.
Yeah.
So bear with us. We'll get there. So we're going to do the devotion, and we're going to go in on Matthew 10, which John preached on Sunday. So it's Matthew 10, 24 to 39. A disciple is not above the teacher, Jesus said, nor the slave above the master. It's enough for the disciple to be like the teacher, or the slave like the master. If they have called the master of the house Beelzebul, how much more will they malign those of his household? So have no fear of them, for nothing is covered up that will not be uncovered, and nothing secret that will not become known. What I say to you in the dark, tell in the light, and what you hear whispered, proclaim from the housetops. Do not fear those who kill the body but cannot kill the soul. Rather, fear him who can destroy both soul and body in hell. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground unperceived by your Father. And even the hairs of your head are all counted. So do not be afraid. You are of more value than many sparrows. Everyone, therefore, who acknowledges me before others, I also will acknowledge before my Father in heaven. But whoever denies me before others, I will deny before my Father in heaven. Do not think that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to set a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and one's foes will be members of one's own household. Whoever loves father and mother more than me is not worthy of me, and whoever loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And whoever does not take up the cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Those who find their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it. The Gospel of the Lord.
Yeah.
Praise you, O Christ. So, John, you preached about this. I mean, do you have any initial thoughts you wanted to share, just even beyond your sermon today?
I think the thing that I had the sermon that I preached about. Let's just be really honest about how these verses hit us, and especially being a new dad, and that line of whoever loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. I don't really think Jesus means that as it comes off. He very well could, and that might just be me trying to downplay what it is. That might just be my own reaction to it. But it's one of those things where Jesus says one thing and does something very, very differently. And God does that a lot. Not just Jesus in the New Testament, but God does that so much in just the whole story between, Abraham to now of, I'm going to say one thing, but I'm going to do something very different. Of my anger burns against Israel, but yeah, come here. Let's, all's forgiven. I think Jesus is really trying to get us to the point of this is something serious, and this is something new, and by being a part of it, you're going to upset people, which Jesus does often with the Pharisees and scribes. They're almost always at odds with one another, and Jesus is really saying to his disciples, which he's really giving them a lecture at this point before they get on their way, people aren't going to like what you have to say, and your own parents are going to say to you, what are you doing with this Jesus guy? And you're going to explain to them, and they're going to think you're crazy.
Yeah.
And may disown you because you've left a wonderful job. You hear in the story of Jesus calling the disciples of James and John in the boat with their dad, and they just up and leave. And I'm sure their dad Zebedee probably had some thoughts about what they were doing, and Jesus too, of who took my kids away from me. It really kind of sets the stage for just how topsy-turvy life becomes when you become a follower of Jesus.
Yeah, I like the way you talked about, you mentioned the topsy-turvy at the end, especially, John, because I think that's the real struggle. I think it's a struggle for Christians. I really do. Because I think the fact that the overarching message of Jesus coming to earth was ultimately to give his life that all might be saved. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that's something that I think we get behind pretty quickly and easily. I think we get behind and embrace very quickly and easily this notion that somehow, well, everybody's a sinner, and that includes me, but that's okay because Jesus dies and forgives me, and my hope rests in him. I think the difficulty is people need to also realize that there was an awful lot of other stuff that Jesus taught. Yes, our ultimate faith lies in the fact that our salvation and our hope is in the fact that because we are sinners, Christ died for the ungodly, which is what we read last week.
Yeah.
I think the difficult part is that Jesus also did an awful lot of teaching that, and I think this is the hard part for us as listeners. If we were there at that time, we probably wouldn't have been cheering him on. We probably wouldn't have been saying, sell everything I have and give it to the poor and come and follow me. That's a great idea, in fact. I would love to do that. Instead, we would probably count ourselves, because we have many possessions, being Americans, we would probably count ourselves among the people who labeled him a radical. Shane Hipps is one of those people, right?
Yeah.
From our video series, the Spark House one that we did a couple years ago, where he started this whole project where people basically live very subsistence lives, and they wind up trying to encourage people to live in subsistence lifestyles so that everything they have can be given away. We look at him as a hippie and a radical. I could never do that, we say. Likewise, the notion of forgiveness. I mean, John, you've been a pastor long enough now to have heard people talk about forgiveness and how there are things that they cannot forgive people for. Mm-hmm. And yet Jesus says, gosh, the Lord's Prayer. Forgive us as we forgive those.
Yeah.
We would hear Jesus in ways that would cause us to have problems. And I think that is the divisiveness that I think our faith actually is intended to bring. And here's the trick. I think if we would simply embrace that fact that Jesus' word is a two-edged sword, it both cuts us and also saves us at the same time, I think it would be a lot easier for us as human beings, as Christians, to hear not only are you in the abstract a sinner, but there are attitudes, systems, lifestyles, things we've done nothing about, and blah, 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 that yes, truly make us sinners. Things we need to own, repent of, and then be transformed by Christ's invitation into a different kind of living. I don't know if that makes sense, John.
Yeah, I think you get that sense, and this is, the sermon that I struggled to navigate too in writing of everything kind of falls on the end of that sentence of those who take up their cross and follow me. And I think to your point, not many of us do. Many of us go to that spot and sit in the shadow of the cross because there's grace and there's mercy and forgiveness there. But if we really had the faith that Jesus tells the disciples to proclaim, we'd pick it up too.
Right.
And other people would be in our grace and our mercy and our forgiveness.
Right.
And I don't think we get there.
Right.
And I think that's the real two-edged spot and partly where my reaction in the sermon I gave came out of, I want to sit there because it's nice and it's comfortable and it's wonderful and it's the place you lead me to, but yeah, you're asking a little bit too much.
Right.
And maybe that's why, where I just was perfectly honest saying, I love my parents more than I love Jesus sometimes. Because my parents do things for me and it's wonderful and great, and I love my wife and I love my daughter and I do things for them. But Jesus, you're asking something of me too, and that's just a little bit of a bridge too far.
In other words, I think what you're saying is we look at it like, yeah, you gave me grace and salvation, but what have you done for me lately?
Yeah,
You know,
like that's enough for me. I don't really,
I'm
I'm
cool with that
I'm
part.
waist deep in the water, and that's
I'm a
great.
sinner. I'm covered.
Yeah, I'm authentic with who I am, and I'm
Right.
willing to take all this, but I just, yeah.
Because it's really important to get the context of these. And you mentioned it, John. This is what is known in Matthew as the missionary discourse.
Hmm.
He's sending out the disciples into the world. Last week it was take with you only certain things and
Yeah.
hardly anything and rely on the generosity of strangers and everything. But now he's telling them that, you know, there's things that you don't have to be afraid of, which means that they're going to be afraid of them.
Yeah.
Things are going to transpire. And that this message is going to cause division and derision among people. Um, and I think we have to hear that and say, if we really are also disciples, we too are being sent out with this
Absolutely.
two-edged sword, and it's going to be hard sometimes. It's going to be hard.
Absolutely.
Um, I don't want to lose the grace part because I think there is grace within all this, but I think what you all are going to start hearing through the weeks and through sermons, Matthew's gospel is kind of rough.
Yeah, Jesus isn't necessarily warm and fuzzy.
No,
It's there, but it's like,
this isn't the lead you beside still waters thing. You know what I mean?
this is like tough parenting. I love you, but
Yeah,
I still have expectations for you.
yeah. I mean, like, even like we're going to get to like, parables later on, and those parables are kind of tough on us. They're hard on us. You get done those parables once you look at them and you're like, ooh, boy, I'm not really sure I want to be part of this guy.
I kind of like, I like the mustard seed one. That one's great.
Yeah,
but
that's a pretty one.
I don't want to be the person left out of the banquet.
Right, that's right. So you're going to have to hold on to that kind of notion that Jesus is calling us to a little bit more than just warm, fuzzy hugs.
Hmm?
Yeah, they're there, but it's also a recognition that he calls us into a new life and a new being.
Yeah.
And particularly, remember, the Gospel of Matthew is written to Jewish Christians, people rooted in the law, people who are kind of fundamentally have staked themselves to this is how things are and how they should be. And he says, well, you've heard it said this, but I'm going to tell you this. And I think he makes it harder.
Yeah, and it's said to an audience who's used to having
Very clear.
do this, don't do that.
Yep.
Where for us, it's we're very individualistic, very autonomous people.
Right.
So the context is completely different for the audience of
Right.
Israel's always had the Ten Commandments, and everything falls on that. So when Jesus says, "Go and do," and "Go and don't do," that's he's speaking their language.
Right.
For us, it's, what do you mean I can't go there? What do you mean I can't do that? I want to go where the Gentiles and Samaritans are.
Right.
Nobody tells me where I can't go.
Yeah.
But that's, Peter Enns would say that's a big cultural difference, which makes it hard for us to hear it.
Double-edged sword. We're going to talk more about this through the week. So stay with us. Come back tomorrow again because I think we're probably going to be back in this gospel.
There's a lot to sort through here.
There's a lot to sort through. We'll be back in this gospel again to kind of talk out a little bit more as well. You want to pray us?
Sure.
Do it.
The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Heavenly King, you call us to new life with you. And life with you is not always rose-colored lenses, where you call us to see the world as it is, to see ourselves in the world as we are, not like we wish we were. You call us to have faith that's active and not passive. Help us to hear that message honestly. Help us to live the commands that you give us wholeheartedly. Because in abiding with you and living with you and the life that you give, we stand to gain more than we think that we lose. Help us to remember that in the shadow of your cross is grace and mercy and forgiveness, but that cross needs to be moved to the places that you need to be, where we are called to share your love, your peace, and your mercy with the whole world. Help us to actively do that each and every day. In your Son's name.
Amen.
Amen.
Have a great day. See you tomorrow.
Take care.